Welcome to the Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast, bringing you the country's top podcast on the subject of internet marketing, with your hosts Glenn Thayer and the CEO of Intuitive Websites, Thomas Young.
Well, folks, welcome back to another Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Thayer. With me today is CEO of Intuitive Websites, Thomas Young. Today we're going to be talking about the importance of your product or your service and how it relates to sales and marketing. For those of you that tuned into our previous podcast, we really talked about simplicity. This is kind of the next step in how important is your product or service when it comes to your marketing offerings. So, Tom, let's just kick it right off and get right in. Let's talk about the marketing efforts. And, I've heard different things. You can correct me here. Salvador Dali said that PR is more important than talent. So let's take that into marketing. And I guess the question would be, are marketing efforts secondary to the product or service itself?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Salvador Dali because, unfortunately, I think he's passed away.
Yes,
and
he's no longer with us.
He's lived many, many years ago, and there was a time when PR was more important than actual value or service or product. That's not the case anymore. And in fact, the internet has changed that. If you can't bring value with your product and service, then you're going to pay the price on the web just because of the way people communicate about these things and talk about them. And so, and we haven't spent a lot of time in our podcast talking about the importance of your product or service, but all marketing efforts really are focused on your product and service and how good it is. And it's easier to say that than to actually do it. But the important thing to know is that the web and the internet drives transparency. So whatever value people get from your product and service is going to be 100% evident on the web. And that content then and any kind of promotion that you have is going to only be as good as your product or service. So you can almost think of this as like a circle. And in the middle of that circle, and the target, is your product and service. And then everything else you do comes out of that in layers. And Seth Godin has written about this and talked about it in his blog and postings. And it's so true. And really, at the center of everything you do, from web marketing to sales, the product and service has to be excellent. Because if it's not, it'll be totally transparent.
Well, let's before we jump into all of the the next 6 pieces for as far as strategy is concerned, have you found that people get caught up in this whole marketing cycle? Because what happens is you might have a great service or a great product, but because you have lousy copy on your website, or you don't have a blog, you don't have ways to create copy around this that's simple, that's easy to use, and it might be a convoluted marketing strategy, or you may not have a marketing strategy. So when you're dealing with that, this kind of puts it into a fear-based category where people are thinking, well, I don't even want to start a marketing campaign because what if I get it wrong? Well, then it's quickly transparent because obviously you get that real-time feedback on the web. And what happens to Facebook is we brought them up before as a free service. It's free. You get what you pay for. But yet as soon as something goes wrong or something is down on Facebook, everybody's complaining, and it is huge. And it's like, hey, this is free. It's not like you're paying a monthly fee for being there.
Well, it's true. I mean, ultimately, you want both. You want a great product or service, and you want excellent marketing. But the point of this podcast is the product or service has to be ready. It has to come first. And there have been marketing successes of products that aren't that great, but those are much fewer in scope than they used to be. I mean, think about the U.S. automotive industry. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a time when marketing really just sold cars. But now that's changed dramatically because if the car doesn't last, people just will not go back. Right. And literally think of like American Motor Company, AMC, if you remember that.
The Eagle.
The Eagle, that's right. These cars, they were terrible products, but they were marketed really well. A lot of people bought them, and of course the company didn't last. So the key really is to have a great marketing or a great product or service first, and then start your marketing. Now there are also examples of great products and services out there that aren't marketed well, and the world doesn't know about them. So you've got to, at some point, your marketing has to kick in, and you've got to tell the world.
And I guess that's where I was starting with it in a long roundabout way, which happens occasionally. I guess the bottom line is, before we go and start, I want to make sure that our listeners and viewers aren't stuck on the concept of it has to be perfect before we start doing marketing. That in the age of transparency with all of this, you can start with something and then keep tweaking it out, with user testing, whatever it might be. That is something that I have learned over this last decade, and especially what's really, really big with Fortune 500 companies right now in content marketing is put it out there. The people that are watching your blogs and reading them, they will give you the feedback. You'll get the feedback. And then the greatest thing is because it's all online, you can change it that day.
Absolutely.
You can fix it.
And there's actually websites out there now that are specifically set up for products that aren't quite finished, like the crowdfunding websites. Kickstarter.com comes to mind. But at some point, you're going to have a great product or service, and it's going to have to be completed. In fact, the big elephant in the room with Kickstarter is, well, what if they can't produce? What if the promise that was made isn't going to happen? Or what if they can produce, but not at the scale that the internet has asked them to produce at? If that makes sense or not. But it's a very different thing to say, okay, we've got a prototype. We just got an order for $10 million. How are we going to ever make that work? They might not even get the funding to do the production. So, but once you have a great product or service, the next layer then is going to be the usability of that product or service and how easy it is to use and buy, and the support that comes with it. What kind of help is available if needed, and what kind of guarantees and customer service and so forth. Those things have to be in place before we start talking about the next level.
Well, let's from a usability and support standpoint, are there some decent examples that we have from like a software-based thing? As right now, a good example, I use Logic Studio to do a lot of the edits for the podcast.
From the Apple product, right?
It's an Apple product. So if you are on a PC, I'm sorry, it's only available for a Mac. However, that being said, if I run into a challenge somewhere and I need support, over half the time I go away from the Apple website or the Logic forums that are hosted by Apple. I go elsewhere. Now, are you finding this, that support is not only on a company's website, and this is, I'm mainly going from a software standpoint, but let's say if you need new drivers, you go to the website and get it, but if you need how it interacts with other software, are you finding that companies are spending time in other forums as well to provide support? Well,
it's interesting you brought up Apple. There's two companies that are the two of the most popular companies in the U.S. are Google and Apple. Right? We use their products all the time. And if you think about Apple, it was just a few years ago that they had no support, pretty much zero support. And then they opened up retail stores that had some support. And now Apple is all about support. They want you in their stores and they want to give you all the support they can. That has really led to the growth of Apple because alone, just having a great product on its own wasn't enough. They had to have the support. And then so once the support starts, the internet also builds the community to provide support from your peers. Right. But look at Google. For the average person, there's no concept of all in the world of actually calling Google. I mean, could you imagine someone thinking, I'm going to pick up my phone and call Google because I have a question about this search result I just got or these ads I've been seeing? Doesn't happen, non-existent. Right. So what Google's going to have to do at some point is they have to reach out beyond where they are right now, which is basically talking to agencies like ours, and be able to, how does Google interact with the customer, with the end user?
Do they? Do they even interact with?
They don't. They didn't interact at all. So they've got a great product, but they've got to get to that next level of usability and support. Once you have usability and support, then the next level would be content and understanding. And we talked quite a bit about using content to market your company and your website and simplicity and understanding and so forth. But it's real important that that's only going to be as good as the first two layers that we talked about, which is the product and service and the usability and support. Once you have those in place, then the content, not only can you spread the content through your marketing channels and so forth, but it'll develop a life of its own on the internet. And then from that will come this loyal base of followers and so forth, and you'll expand into other layers.
Now, coming in from a content standpoint, when somebody's writing copy, obviously there's two different types of copy that you can go. You can do sales copy, which is more of a call to action, buy my product or service or hire us. The other one is from a thought leadership strategy. How should product-based organizations and service-based organizations take a look at that from a content point of view?
Well, I think there's a connection between thought leadership and the quality of your product and service. There's just you can't be a thought leader and have a substandard product or service.
Right.
So basically, once you have the service in place or whatever it is, the knowledge should come out of that. And then what happens with that knowledge base is you start to segment your marketplace, you start to build a competitive advantage, and then from that you'll get to the next level, which is loyal followers, which is this idea of having a very strong market base of loyal supporters that all fit in with that. And when you talk about knowledge and you talk about a knowledge leader, being a knowledge leader doesn't have to mean that you're the smartest or the best. It just has to mean that whatever you're communicating connects with this group of loyal followers. There's certainly products out there that aren't as great as other products that have great loyal followers. I'm a big fan of Apple and the iPad, but there's a lot of devices out there that people use, and they have loyal fans and loyal followers. In fact, there's marketing campaigns that are almost built on this idea of anti-Apple. I think the one that comes to mind is the company that's using a pen to write on your iPad, or
okay.
it would be what company is that? I'm drawing a blank on the name, but I think it might be Samsung.
Okay.
And but basically that's opposite of what the iPad does. The iPad, you use your finger. You would never use a stylus on the iPad. But there's going to be a group of loyal followers following that company, making it happen.
Absolutely. Well, how does content and understanding, how does that drive sales?
Well, I think that once you connect it with the loyal followers, then you start to look at this other level of stuff, and that's including price, and then the whole concept of creating attention. And then just want to say one thing about price. Price is relative to the needs of the loyal followers that you have and the value that they're going to get. The one thing that the internet has done to pricing, though, is it has made it transparent. So we can all research pricing, but there's much more than just the lowest price. So, but then the final layer here, which is what you're getting at, Glenn, is the idea of creating attention. And in a lot of cases, this final level was the first level. Let's create attention. Let's build publicity. Let's get people looking at this, and then sales will just happen. Well, now creating attention should really happen after you have the other 5 steps taken care of. And creating attention is the stuff we've talked about all the time: SEO, online advertising, even content marketing to some extent, PR and publicity, anything that drives people to have an experience with your product or service or your website.
So what would be the key action items for our listeners and viewers today?
Well, I think that this is one of those podcasts that kind of puts all your marketing items on hold for a second and says, hey, wait a minute, let's look at the value of our actual product and service and how important is that to our target market. Let's make sure that is really shored up and doing really well, and then we can go back and revisit these traffic generation ideas that we have. And then keep in mind, marketing and PR and attention and awareness is not a substitute for great value and results. And this should be integrated into your marketing plans, your web marketing plans, and make sure those plans don't lose their product focus. And if you don't do this, and if you don't continue to improve your product and service, keep in mind that your competitors will. And in a lot of times, they'll do this online, and they'll catch you by surprise. You won't even see your market share eroding. So hopefully this podcast will help people kind of step back and focus on the basics that are very, very important.
And I do want to touch base one last time and one last wrap around, because you touch on price, and you talked about the idea that everything's transparent with pricing. And there's a huge difference between the value of creating high value for a client versus low price. And there's a low price and value, and having something of high value doesn't mean that it's cheap and has the lowest price. I just want to remind, because that's right. A huge thing, is lowest price,
absolutely
not the best value, and it's usually not the best value.
I love what Seth Godin says about the race to the bottom. That if you have the lowest price, you're basically racing to the bottom. Then what do you do when you get there? Well, you find yourself on the bottom.
You're Walmart.
You're Walmart. That's right.
You're Walmart, and they've got a business plan around that. So. Well, folks, once again, thank you so much for joining us here for the Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. If you have any topics you'd like us to go over or explore, make sure you drop us a line at info@intuitivewebsites.com. Thank you so much for joining us.
This has been an Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. For more information and to see all the available podcasts and much more, visit intuitiveblog.com. If you have a website you would like us to review or an issue you would like to see covered in future podcasts, email us at info@intuitivewebsites.com.